It was noticed during the conflict. When you start churning up large amounts of ground, poppies do spring up. It was growing in the battlefields, and after the First World War, there was a move which came originally out of France and out of America. It was adopted by the American Legion first, and then the British Legion in the early 1920s as the symbol of the British Legion.
And who picked up on poppies? I mean, was it, as it were, the authorities, the officials, or was it...
No, it wasn't. No, it was soldiers involved in the conflict, and particularly those in the early days of the flying corps, who were flying over the battlefields and could see this extraordinary profusion of red poppies growing in no man's land and in the fields that have been churned up with all the mud.
And Sue Hubbard, we're now looking at this extraordinary profusion, to use your words there, Alwyn, of poppies at the Tower of London. An incredible visual display there. What do you make of it as a piece of art?
I think it's problematic as a piece of art because I think it's trying to do several things at once. One is that obviously it's a thing of remembrance. It's something that's going to be sold. But the fact is it's a bit aestheticized, it's a bit sanitized. And the First World War, if it was anything, was nothing if not brutal. I think of the lines of Wilfred Owen, who talks about the pity of war. There's something just a bit clean about it. It's a bit like the Diana Memorial.
Are you then with the actress Sheila Hancock, who says that rather than removing these poppies and selling them on to people to have as an individual piece of remembrance, that actually they should send the tanks in and mow them down, that would be a better commemoration of the brutality?
Maybe. I mean, it seems a bit melodramatic. I think that perhaps actually if they'd been made of living material, if there'd been real poppies that had actually died, there's something a little bit designery about it.
What do you think of it, Mr. Turner, this particular...
I think it's the same as all the great symbols of remembrance that came about in the aftermath of the First World War. People put their meaning into it. This is incredibly popular. Millions of people have identified with this. The idea that it's sanitised seems to be an absurd concept. I don't think most people need artists to tell them that the First World War was bloody and brutal. And that doesn't seem to me a message that has been lost at any stage. And it reminds me of the reception that was that was given to the cenotaph when it was first set up as a temporary structure for one day only. And the British people demanded that it be built in stone and remain for all time.
Because it was actually a temporary...
It was intended just for the Peace Day parade in June 1919, and the government was very reluctant to allow that to happen. They thought that the people were being over-sentimental about this, and they carried on thinking that for years afterwards, with all of these symbols, and it seems to be exactly the same thing. The people are wrong.
I mean, it does have to be said, doesn't it, that if you look at war memorials, the Menem Gate, the Cenotaph, those you find in every village, I mean, all of them have an elegance about them.
I agree, and that's why I said that I think the complication is that it's trying to do several things. I mean, obviously, I totally accept that it's extremely popular. One of the problems is immediately we start trying to talk about it as art, because then we enter a different arena. If you want to look at art that's on in London at the moment that has the grittiness of dealing with war, go and see Ansel Kiefer at the Royal Academy. I would be happy if we didn't even call it art.
But this does have blood, and it does have the idea of hundreds of thousands of casualties.
Of course it does. And it has touched the popular imagination. It doesn't necessarily make it good art, and then we're getting into a problem of aesthetics.
But what it has done, Alwyn Turner, is give a visual illustration to an almost unimaginable concept, hasn't it?
I think that's what people are responding to is just the sheer scale of it, and it is a way of capturing unimaginably large numbers. I mean, is that, or you say, well, is it the equivalent of 10 Wembley stadiums full of people? I mean, these things are so vast, it is almost impossible to visualise.
An element of the fact that we are now, people are more inclined to let their feelings out, and that perhaps 100 years ago people were much more reticent about grieving in public, if you like?
I think the real shock 100 years ago was that nobody had any idea of grieving on this scale. Nobody actually knew how to articulate that. Prior to the First World War, the world of the military and the civilian were very, very separate in Britain. It's only with that mass volunteering and then with conscription, that virtually every family gets touched by military life, let alone by war. And nobody really knew what to do with that in 1919, 1920. It was almost impossible, which is why we have this plethora of symbols, the poppy, the 2-minute silence, the cenotaph, the tomb of the unknown warrior, the last post. All these things are adopted by the people.
But the 2-minute silence is so profound. You know, less is sometimes more.
What did Evelyn Waugh say about it? He said it
though.
was disgusting, didn't he?
Indeed, yes. But that was prior to it actually happening. Maybe he changed his mind later. But all of these things are very, very simple.
And that's what Evelyn Waugh said about it.
But they only have meaning because the people have put meaning into them. There is virtually nothing there in the first place. The symbol poppy it doesn't mean anything until we invest it with all that
But the fact
weight.
is that these are artificial poppies, and they're ceramic, and they're very neat.
The British
They're
Legion
fragile,
poppy has
I suppose,
been
as well, aren't they?
artificial since the beginning, though. It's always been
Okay.
that.
Sue Hubbard, Alwyn Turner, we've run out of time, but thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.